Hello, YouTube, and we're gonna do another one of these Randomizer Mondays. Oh, it's a defense mission. Those take so long. Alright, well, let's go ahead and hit the randomize button anyway. I can remember I was doing some work here, leveling some weapons. Well, we're gonna go ahead and just see what we come up with. What we come up with appears to be Garuda. And Garuda, first of all, I'm not sure what I'm going to run with as a focus school, presumably Zenuric, but we'll see. Garuda is one of those Warframes that's got a really interesting economy when it comes to... What the heck? Oh, interesting. One of those Warframes that has a really interesting economy when it comes to energy and whatnot, just because her third ability allows her to essentially convert energy back into health. And one of the ways that we can take advantage of that is if we're bringing a melee weapon that is running with Life Strike, but unfortunately this does not appear to be set up with that yet, so let's go ahead and fudge the build a little bit here. I think I've shown off my Kronens on the randomizers once before, but here they are again. I would much prefer to be setting up with a Kronen Prime because it's a much stronger weapon, but man, I'm still missing blades, so you know, what can you do? What can you do? Anyways, but as you can see here, we're essentially just running condition overload meta, and if I was to format it once, this would be able to fit much higher tiers of all of these mods. So you save 7 capacity there, up that by a few, up that by a few, up that by a few. There you go. Anyways, we're running melee damage up pressure point, Prime Fury for attack speed, slash Colon Toxin to make viral and status, and then like I said, I'm just adding Life Strike in so I can get a little bit of healing off of Garuda, and of course condition overload. What else do we roll here? Well, we're going to go ahead and hop on to our friend the Rakta Ballistica, which is not a great weapon, but not a terrible weapon. That's what I usually like to say about the Rakta Ballistica, is it's certainly a lot weaker than the Ballistica Prime. Like, if you look at the base stats on the weapons, it is a much weaker weapon than the Ballistica Prime. The 1.5 times the 2 times crit multiplier is just a huge buff to the weapon there, where it essentially doubles the potential critical damage output, so you can actually build for a hybrid crit status build as opposed to just for crit. And as you can see here, the IPS distribution is different, but higher status chance makes a big difference. Big thing about the Rakta Ballistica that I like to say, though, is that it's one of those weapons that's just on the edge of being barely good enough to be usable, you know? And it does also still have the Syndicate Rakta proc, which restores energy and procs viral and AoE, so that's nice. What we're running here is we're running Hornet Strike, Barrel Diffusion, damage, multi-shot, generic stuff. I've got both Lethal Torrent and Gunslinger on here because of how slow the charge rate is on the Ballistica. As you can see here, dropping both those off brings the charge rate down to 1.0, and for some reason these pistol crossbows aren't gaining double fire rate effects, because normally on blow type weapons you get double the fire rate per mod, so you're actually able to draw them very fast with just one fire rate mod, and that usually helps to just make the weapon a lot more usable, but apparently that's not the case with things like the Ballistica. Anyways, we're not going to worry about that too much. Big thing here is Pistol Pestilence, Jolt, and Scorch. Another thing that's worth noting about why I want to run my Ballistica like this, my Rakta Ballistica, is that I want to, especially because we're not getting crits out of this, and so the base, we're relying on just the mediocre base damage, I very much want to charge each shot. The charge shots have, I believe, the same total damage per single tick of ammo as the spam shots if you just click on it and let 4 bolts come out of the barrel. And what ends up happening there is that the weapon is not only inaccurate when you're spamming it, but it's also going to fire off so much less damage per clip. So we're trying to make sure that, for the sake of efficiency, we're charging the shots up, we're getting the nice accurate single bolts to get headshots on enemies, and it's just got something resembling raw damage. I've never been a particular fan of Rakta Ballistica. What I have been a fan of for the longest time is the Flux Rifle. This is a weapon that I have loved even back in, say, 2013, 2014, because this weapon, right when, it was one of the first entertaining corpus weapons that you could get out of things like things like the dojo research and whatnot. And this weapon, it has been through a couple of iterations. It's been changed to not use ammunition as opposed to the way it used to be set up, where it was a real ammo hog. You'd have like 200 rounds in the clip, and it would consume them at a rate of 20 per second or something crazy like that. And it would be a huge ammo hog in the past, but now it no longer uses any ammo. It just passively has a recharge battery out of combat, which makes this a very good weapon if you're wanting to bring some kind of sustained DPS gun to an area where there's not going to be good ammo supplies, particularly open world zones or Valis and Plains of Eidolon. And the other thing that's worth noting about it is that the Flux Rifle, the other reason why I enjoy it and why I have this rather odd looking build on here, I'm sure you've been getting your eyes over this to see what's going on. The Flux Rifle has some interesting stats, and among them is that it has the highest numerical ribbon disposition in the game. I believe that, numerically speaking, the numbers on a ribbon for the Flux Rifle are about 154% of the base mods that they're representing. Obviously, that's going to depend on whether you have negatives on the ribbon and exactly how many stats it has, because ribbons are complex little beasts. But the base stat for the multiplier compared to a regular mod is I believe 1.54, which, as you can see there, 255 damage versus 165 damage. That is massive. And because of that, that means that the Flux Rifle can achieve some pretty crazy levels of stats if you're going to get ribbon for it. So I would say that Flux Rifle ribbons are among some of the most powerful ribbons in the game, since they turn this weapon from a reasonably strong mid-tier weapon into an easily sortie viable beast. So as you can see here, this has damage, heat, crit damage. So I'm a little bit short on elemental slots because I wanted to slot in Flux Overdrive instead, since the Flux Overdrive allows this weapon to gain a massive quantity of status chance. And a big part of the build that you want to run on a Flux Rifle is you want to set up for, obviously, a lot of base damage, serration, split chamber. I also think it's a great candidate for heavy caliber, just because of Flux Overdrive letting you easily cap out on status chance even when you're wasting extra slots, like for mods like heavy caliber or vigilante armaments. But anyways, like I said, the big thing here is that Flux Overdrive lets the status fluctuate between about 75% and about 95%-ish, somewhere in that vicinity. So that means that we don't necessarily need to be stacking many dual stat mods. We definitely have space to up the already considerable slash percentage with Fang Fusillade. And like I said, the other crazy thing that we're doing here is this is a crit damage ribbon for whatever reason. And if I remember right, the base critical damage on the Flux Rifle is reasonable. This is not a weapon where critical stats are huge, and you're not going to be seeing this being better as a pure crit weapon than with any kind of hybrid builds. But like I said, with Flux Overdrive, you can gain a ton of status chance already, so stacking dual stats and elementals isn't huge. And since our ribbon already has elemental damage on it, we're already got like plus 200% elemental. Each mod beyond that point has pretty heavily diminishing returns. So that's why I'm setting up and going ahead and abusing the critical damage here as well. And as you'll see, the Fang Fusillade and the high status chance slash here, plus crits, allow this thing to murder armored targets just completely. This should also do crazy things to Corpus enemies. There's only one thing, and one thing only, that I'm worried about, and it's that the Corpus that we're fighting have bonus slash damage, which means that the raw DPS here is not going to be as present because of how much of the weapon's damage output is through slash damage. So we're going to have to rely pretty heavily on procs. And one important thing is that Garuda is very good at forcing procs to occur. So the loadout that we've got here is a little bit interesting, and one might argue that it would be better if I could find a slot for adaptation, but I find that it's more useful, instead of going like Vitality, Steel Fiber, Adaptation, to grab Quick Thinking and Prime Flow on Garuda. And the reason for that is, like I said, with her Bloodletting, where she is going to go ahead and spend a decent chunk of her HP to convert that to energy with a given multiplier. Again, I looked up exactly how this works once upon a time. You get a higher multiplier for the energy conversion ratio if you grab more ability efficiency. And I believe that it also is not, the math isn't that it's converting, I believe the math isn't based on your health that you're sacrificing, because regardless of your vitality, whether that's there or not, you're still going to end up with the same percentage of your energy pool filled. And that's why we're going with streamlined flow here, is because I want to be able to make sure that that we gain as much energy per cast as possible. So we're going with flow to make sure that the percentage of the energy pool that's being filled by bloodletting is a more raw energy than you would see otherwise. Now, obviously, with all of these mods kind of taken up, the remainder of our build is going to be kind of tight. But that said, with this kind of setup, our Garuda is very, very tanky and very hard to kill. So what we're going with here for the rest of the slots is we're going with Transient Fortitude as a very important mod, in the sense that it gives us a large chunk of power strength, which means that our Seeking Talents have a much higher bleed chance applied. See, because enemies hit by the Seeking Talents gain the little symbols above their head, right, that cause them to take up a percentage of all incoming damage as proccing bleed, regardless of what damage types are hitting them. They just gain a 77% chance that now that incoming damage will also proc slash. That is going to be how we're going to deal with these tanky corpus here, is primarily by spamming Seeking Talents. Other big thing for the setup is that we definitely want the health percentage per second on Blood Altar to be a little bit higher. So that's where we're going with the Transient Fortitude there, since that's going to up the percentage of max HP gains per second. And I believe that's percentage before taking Vitality into account, so I think that's scaling with the 300 base health rather than the max health. But I forget exactly how that works. The important thing, though, is that it is always percentage based, so Warframes like Naros can gain massive impact off that. I particularly dislike the ability Dread Mirror, and it's nothing to do with the ability being bad, because the Dread Mirror is an extremely powerful ability. It's essentially a passively carried Volt Shield that doesn't cost any energy to maintain, and it's also letting you jump to enemies, and you can throw it to kill things. You see all those nice little cinematics there. Big thing about Dread Mirror, there are two main things that I dislike about the way that the ability is coded. The first is that the ability produces a hissing noise in the background while the mirror is active, which I dislike. I find very annoying. And the second is that the mirror itself tends to lag behind your Warframe as you turn around. And I'll try to show that off in the gameplay, where the mirror essentially has built-in input lag to where it turns and faces, which makes it very hard to move the mirror to catch incoming damage. It's always a lagging bit behind. And when you consider that things like Volt Shields move with your cursor instantly, as opposed to having some kind of delayed reaction. And there's a couple other abilities out there that have similar functionality, where it's block projectiles in a given direction. Baruch's another good example, right? The fact that the Dread Mirror feels so laggy and difficult to use makes it kind of annoying. So you'll see me really preferring to just spam Seeking Talents from range and position well to where I could just heal off of a Blood Altar, push through incoming damage, and not have to worry so much about blocking. But against the Corpus, I'm going to have to use this. It's too good at blocking Corpus damage, too good at blocking projectiles. Remaining mods here that I haven't mentioned: Continuity and Constitution to help make up for Transient Fortitude and to make sure that abilities like the Altar and the Mirror last longer. The Constitution is going to give us knockdown recovery. We're also stacking Pain Threshold, some level of Pain Threshold, to make sure that Quick Thinking is less likely to stagger lock. Obviously, this build could use one more Forma, because even with the Steel Charge, one of the best auras, we're still capped out and not able to max the Pain Threshold. But by the same token, it's going to be it's functional in its current state. I play this against high level content a lot. Garuda is quite a strong Warframe. She's not exactly an amazing ability nuker, because the big issue with Garuda is specifically that the Seeking Talents have a target cap. they'll never hit more. They fire off, I believe, 8 daggers, and so you're never going to be able to hit more than 8 enemies, which means that you're essentially going to never get an entire room cleared with them. And the other problem being that there's also that charge up mechanic on it. And her other abilities aren't particularly good ability nuking skills, and nor are they particularly scary crowd control or support tools. But Garuda is very tanky, so that she does fulfill a role within any particular squad, and that you've got yourself a nice bruisery brawler that's able to put out significant damage to individual targets. I'm also not even going to bother showing off the cat. Smita Kavat, I always would say charm and the Kavat healing and the radar and that kind of stuff is what I want, but I've shown off that particular cat so many times. The thing is, I also do have an Adarza Kavat sitting around. I think I named it the girlfriend or something crazy like that. But the thing about it is that the Adarza gives more consistent critical stats, but the Smita can also give you massive damage boosts just by letting you have free energy casting or by giving you pure orange crits for a time. And while it's inconsistent, the Smita also does so many other things like amping up your resource gain, amping up your XP gain, giving you temporary shield refreshes. That's been particularly useful actually with Hildren. I don't know if you've tried out Smita Kavat plus Hildren yet, but she's the Smita is almost as good as, some kind of arcane at making sure that the incoming, what am I saying? Making sure that you occasionally get full shield refreshes. It's definitely better than Sentinel Guardian, and it's almost as good as some arcanes that I've seen. And that's pretty impressive considering, that the Smita also does all of these other things. That's why I think I'm getting at is, to anybody who likes the Adarza Kavat, hopefully he'll enjoy his Rakta Ballistica there. To anybody who likes the Adarza Kavat, I can't blame you. The consistent crits are very strong. But the big issue with the Adarza... Oh, these aren't Corpus, these are Infested. I thought they were Corpus for some reason, because I saw LLD. Whoops. Well, I guess I'm not that worried about the Dread Shield here then. But I'll be quiet for a second. So you can hear that hissing noise. Oh, I need to definitely put that there to heal the operative. There's that hissing noise, and as you can see here, I can spin my Garuda almost completely around, and the shield very, very slowly follows her rather than doing anything instantaneously. Which is why I really don't like her. The ability that much. I feel like it's coded in a rather awkward fashion. Anyways, we'll go ahead and drop the Xenoric. I don't think it's huge on Garuda, but there's not really much better to do, I mean, it's one of those cases where you could maybe take Unairu, or you could maybe take Vazarin for things like the damage reflection or the instant revives, but I mean, there's not much else to do. Is the operative full health? Operative's full health. You didn't get out there. As you can see, the Flux Rifle is able to deal a reasonable amount of damage, even against these slash-resistant infested. It's still pretty good. Base damage is very low on that ability because of the slash resistance that they have in this particular mission, but we're gonna be okay because guess what? It still procs the slash effects and the finisher damage dealt by actual slash procs. See, there we go. We got the pure orange crits coming after the cat now. The finisher damage dealt by slash procs bypasses all resistances, even sortie effects like elemental resistance and Exodus damage resistance. Now there's still some alterations being dealt to the amount of proc damage based on the enemy's armor types, but it's not actually reduced by any amount of armor or damage resist, which is pretty cool. There are going to be some enemies where the base damage that the slash proc is based off of is different, but who cares? That's all just mathematics, and the important thing is that the proc itself ignores resistances and therefore kills very quickly. Like so. Goodbye. Chaos, healing. You see that the operative's gaining massive quantities of health per second by standing in the zone, and that's just because, like I said, it's percentage based. Percentage based healing is very, very strong. And so Garuda, as you can see here, does quite a bit of value for being able to support an objective, giving it healing. And she also is very tanky. She's able to put out a reasonable percentage of damage. Not going to hard carry you, but it will always pull her weight. I think that's a very solid Warframe. I don't think Garuda is really the end-all be-all. She doesn't do anything really far out of the usual, other than, you know, the whole health to energy, back to health kind of thing that you can do passively. But beyond that, I don't have any problems with her. Another one of those, the operative can heal up. That healing is just so strong. It's not, it's no Trinity, you know. I mean, anytime you want to talk about how good a healing spell, healing spell is in Warframe, you gotta compare it to Trinity pressing one button and getting you full health and shields. But with that aside, I mean, we don't have to compare it to, we don't always have to say that it's a bad thing just because it's not the best thing in the game. And I'd say that Garuda's healing is on par with Oberon's in terms of how quickly it can top off your health pool. Not necessarily as consistent as Oberon's. I mean, Phoenix Removal is insane, but, you know. That huge critical multiplier though off the ribbon and whatnot. And that ribbon I've even considered rolling some more too, just because of how much the critical stats of the weapon aren't really optimal. The only reason why I'm even billing for any amount of crit is just because I'm already at max status and tons of slash damage, so what else do you need for status at that point? And, I mean, what else are you going to do then to amplify the weapon's damage output? It's going to add more raw DPS with things like, what's his name? What's the mod I'm thinking of? Heavy Caliber? You can. It's not really any call to do so. Obviously, if the ribbon that I have on this thing was just straight up something like base damage, multi-shot, elemental damage, that would be even more optimal. But, you know, what can you do? Go ahead and hit him. Another thing that you'll notice here is that even though I do have the Zinger on, I'm really not spamming it frequently, and that's just because Garuda isn't hugely... She isn't a huge energy hog, but more importantly, she also has a tool to instantly give herself, you know, a few hundred energy. I think that's 200 or so that replenishes. I mean, I can test that, I guess. Test that pretty easily, actually, just by channeling this so I can get my... Oh, I forget how stupid it looks when she's waddling around charging this ability up. Hiya! So let's see, 320 energy-ish. Jumps up to 540 energy. Okay, so yeah, it's roughly 200 that you get out of that with this particular setup. It means that if you actually cast the ability twice and go to 0 HP, you do instantly go to max energy, which is pretty good. Look at that percentage healing, though. Look at that percentage healing. Make sure we're topped off. And there we go. Can't believe that the subject is all the way back here. That's so crazy. But yeah, as you can see here, Kronen, mediocre. The Kronen Prime is a little bit better, obviously. The Flux Rifle, however, a very, very underappreciated weapon. You know, the reason why it has such a high ribbon disposition is because people just don't use it that much. And especially now that it's not really an ammo hog, since, you know, the ammo regenerates passively. Just gotta stop shooting for a second. Now that it's not an ammo hog, it's an incredibly strong weapon. Good range to it, so you can be sniping enemies that are a reasonable distance away from you, kind of like any carbine that you might see. And it's got reasonable damage output. High slash damage, high status chance, especially if you use Flux Rifle, like I'm using. And it's got, you know, it's got a huge ribbon disposition. I have nothing but good things to say about the Flux Rifle. And again, is it the best beam weapon in the game? No, probably not. The big reason why the Flux Rifle suffers in most people's eyes is that it's a continuous beam weapon that only has one target. And that's kind of problematic, you know. It's comparable to the Synapse in terms of damage output, you know, but it's the single target damage is problematic, mostly just because it means that you can't clear giant waves of enemies like weapons like the Ignis and the Empress and even the Animals can do. And the reason why those weapons are meta is just because there's some scaling damage amplification there just by having the damage from the weapon hit multiple enemies at once. It automatically means that you're dealing more damage per second. So that's really why the weapon isn't meta. But as you can see here, that doesn't mean it's not strong. This is a very, very strong beat weapon. Oh my god. That hover though. Wait, can you now use move keys while hovering around? Yes you can, holy cow. Not realize that. Can you do that? Unless there's someone back here on the operative, he took even more damage. Either that, or he's just shooting himself in the foot. I don't know. Anyways, those are my thoughts on Garuda, and on the Flux Rifle, and on, you know, some of the other thoughts here. There's so many other effects going on here. I'm going to go ahead and cut the recording before the last few waves, because, you know, obviously, we're not struggling here. We're able to heal up the operative in pretty simple fashion, so it's not a... not going to be a difficult mission, just time-consuming from this point on, so... Hope you guys are enjoying this, and that's going to be the weekly randomizer. Cut the last 3 waves. Herp to derp out.